Hello, everybody, and welcome to our, I don't even know what number it is of our Day in the Woods virtual version, but I want to acknowledge all of our partners. We're going to talk about mapping your woodland today, and so stay with us here, and we're going to turn it over to Stephanie initially, but you'll see the PowerPoint scrolling through. There's lots of good information out there for you, and most of it's on our Southeast Ohio Woods blog site. We'll share that in the chat box here in a little bit. But today we're going to talk about mapping. And first up, we've got Eric Hayes from over in the Athens Soil and Water Conservation District. And he's going to cover the auditor's websites, which are a great resource to mapping information about your woodlands. So Eric, you want to introduce yourself a little bit more, and then you can share your screen and we can jump right in.
Yeah, so as Dave said, my name's Eric Hayes. I'm with the Athens Soil and Water Conservation District. I am the Wildlife Specialist Forestry Technician. It's a whole mouthful, I know. But I do a lot of work with the individual landowners within the county, and some of the big things that I do a lot of is mapping. That's one of the big questions I get is, can you help me map my woods? Or can you write a management plan that will map out what I should be doing in my woods? Or can you just print me off a map of my general area? I get that a lot. So learning how to map a woodland and find what's available to you is kind of a big thing. There's some resources out there that most landowners don't know about. And one of those being your local county auditor's website. So I'm going to share some of that and kind of show you and take you through kind of what I do when I get a call from a landowner or someone wanting to do some mapping. And most of it's everything that you guys have access to as a landowner. Let's pull this over.
While you're doing that, Eric, I jumped in pretty quickly. Folks, if you're out there and you have questions, you are welcome to pop them in the chat window or the question and answer side of things. I usually have Julie do a run through on that, and I kind of jumped the gun. So if you have questions at all, feel free to just pop them in the chat window or under Q&A, and we'll monitor those and get to those as they pop up.
Now, Dave, are you seeing everything here? Just my Google page right now?
I'm seeing your Google page right now. Yep.
All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you essentially the steps I go through, kind of help you guys figure out how simple it is to get to these resources. So for me, I'm pretty familiar with my county that I work with. As you can see, I've looked at them before. So you go to your local county auditor, you can go to any of the counties. Some of them have the information you're looking for to do the mapping, some don't. Some only provide ArcGIS downloadable information, which is a whole nother type of mapping program that most of everybody doesn't have. But you can go in, and I'll do it somewhat quickly, mostly because I've been here, but generally you want to find searching or maps, and for our county auditor website, each one's different. They all have different setups, so you got to just kind of go on and familiarize yourself with it. But mine is, you go into the searches, property search, county map search, and then essentially they'll pull up an active GIS page that has everybody from each county border, and you can go and find your property, your neighbor's property, who owns the property. Are you still seeing all this, Dave? All right, cool. And so I've got a landowner here that I've been working with, and I wanted to know their acreage or parcel information or anything like that. You can actually click on their property and it'll pop up. And this is all public information. Everybody has access to it. And you can go on and find out all sorts of good information, but you can also click on a map that's more specific to it. It'll zoom to, if you didn't zoom to it. And this helps more than just with trying to figure out who your neighbor is, or trying to find out your acreage or tax values or any of that. You can actually search by parcel numbers. You can search by owners. So if you knew a parcel number of a property, you could search it pretty readily. And then also, they've also got some pretty cool features, like here we had done a pollinator habitat, and we kind of wanted to know how much seed we needed. And for a landowner, you don't need to really go anywhere to find that out. You can kind of just do a quick little map here, and you can draw it off and find out that you got 0.7 acres. So I know I need roughly 0.7 acres of seed to plant that pollinator habitat. There's a lot of features. If you wanted to measure the distance of your boundary, that's on here. Or if you wanted to see what the slope or topography was, you can even get different imagery here or contour lines. So if you wanted to have those contour lines to help you figure out the topography of your land, there's a lot of resources there that a lot of folks don't know. And if you want to know who your neighbor is, that way you can kind of try to figure out, hey, who do I get a hold of to say, hi, I just moved in, I'm your new neighbor. You can find that information out there, send them a little love letter during or through snail mail or some of those ways. And it's not just Athens County. Some counties have really detailed GIS mapping, some don't. I pulled up a couple extras just to kind of show you. And some of the other places, the auditors are open for walk-in map requests. You can see this is one of the things that they pop up on their page right away. Also, engineer's office, the auditor's office, Division of Forestry could potentially help you out a good bit. NRCS, which is Natural Resource Conservation Service. And I know for sure with my county and many other counties do the same thing. You can work with your local soil and water conservation district and we'll make you maps. Generally, if the auditor doesn't have this information, they will actually have a downloads portion where you can get in and they'll have GIS information, which then allows you to download. And you still seeing all this, Stephanie or Dave? Good. All right. So you can pull all of these maps that you'll be looking at here. You can pull a lot of this information off of the local auditor website to be able to create your own maps. And so these are just some maps that I create in ArcGIS, which again, that's one that you guys won't really want to know too much about. It's a pretty complicated system, but all of the information that I utilized to make these maps came from the Athens County or the auditor's website. And most of the county auditors have a lot of those downloadable features because most of what they have is public information. So they put it out there to the public. But this is a really good resource to be able to nose out there to utilize. It helps me tremendously, and you can even go on and print your own maps if you wanted to. Most of the times you can add features like contours or remove them. This one's not downloading all the way, but essentially you can just print off your own little plat maps or parcel maps. There's a lot of features to these. So whenever you're looking into getting started on mapping your woodland or just learning your boundaries to help you get familiarized with your property, start with your auditor's website first and then kind of advance from there as you go. Outside of that, that's the big hits on what I have for the Athens County Auditor websites. And if you can't figure them out, get a hold of your local auditor. It's always good to get familiar with them as well and see how they can help you with any of the mapping. And Dave, that's about the run through, the gist of it.
Thanks, Eric. The other thing, if you're just not comfortable, either your county auditor or your county engineer can usually print maps for you too. I know here in Jackson County, if you go to the county engineer's office, they can create a nice map, whatever size you really need. It costs you a few bucks, but that's got an aerial image of your property with the boundaries and a lot of the features, and you can overlay contours and topography, so you can have those maps at your disposal. Which, if you're not real comfortable with all this online stuff, these folks can be a great resource for you as well. One other thing we might want to talk about is how accurate are those property lines.
That's actually a good point. Plan to talk about. I'm glad you brought that up. So those boundary lines are not exact. Actually, on some of my maps, I didn't do it on that one or that one or even that one, but I like to put in there that they are approximate. These lines could vary 10, 15 feet. I haven't seen them tremendously off, but I have seen them enough to where if you were marking it, your next door neighbor might be like, whoa, that's my property you just put paint on. So these aren't exact. Always rely on your survey to figure out exactly where your line is. But as far as getting you in the general ballpark, these are a good starting point.
Yeah, and it's also good to just check to see what the auditor thinks the lines are, because my property actually, in my southwest portion, there were some parcels there, small parcels that go way back to the mining and the railroad days that did not show up. And when I got digging into it, they've since changed it and added those parcels in, and it reduced a little corner of my property, which I was certain based on where the fence had been for years that I probably didn't own on the other side of the line. But it's just good to see what they have on record and what actually is going on out there in the field. So with that, so do you have anything else, words of wisdom on those auditor sites other than?
Basically, like those maps that I showed that were created, essentially the cool thing about this, and it segues in nicely into Stephanie's, is we can pull that information from the auditors. We can create these maps for you landowners, and then we can even send you PDFs just like what this is here. And it can have geo-referenced information, which that's just fancy terminology saying that we can give you something to upload in an app on your phone called Avenza, or whichever app you find works best for you. And it will be, you can have active tracking on it. And so I create a lot of these maps that I've taken the information from the actual auditor's website and essentially created a map for a landowner and then gave them that map to utilize for their own tracking to help familiarize them with their own property. So really, I think that segues into what Stephanie's going to talk about a good bit.
Yeah. So you can actually share a map that you've created from the auditor site by email, and they can upload it on their phone and navigate in the field with the software that Stephanie's going to talk about.
Yep. And they can add to the mapping on their own woodland, all those good things, and then do what Stephanie will talk about.
The other thing, I guess the best advice I've got is don't be afraid to just jump onto that auditor's website. Do a Google search for whatever county you're in, and here in Jackson County, you do Jackson County, Ohio Auditor. It'll pop up, find the map section, and just start playing with it. Do a search, find your property, zoom in. A lot of times you can measure, do so many things on that site. So with that, I think we'll have Stephanie load up her PowerPoint and start sharing. And we've got Stephanie Downs with the Division of Forestry, and I'll let her introduce herself in a little more detail here in a second, as soon as she gets things loaded.
Yeah, I'm trying to share my screen real quick here. My name is Stephanie Downs. I am a service forestry coordinator for the Ohio Division of Forestry. So I work with 7 service foresters in Southern Ohio, and then I'm also the service forester for Fairfield County, doing private lands assistance. And so we do a lot of this map making and assisting with management and helping make recommendations for your woods. Let's see if I can get this going here. But I'm going to talk about an app that is available for smartphones today that is called Avenza. And so that's the name of this app. And it actually has 2 different versions. So the one that I use is the free version. You don't have to pay anything. The app's available for use. It does have some limitations. It does have some restrictions of features that you can't use in the free app. If you really like the program and you feel like you need additional features or maps or different things like that, you can actually pay an annual subscription to get the app, and it opens up some other options. To be honest, I've never paid for it. I've always been able to do what I need to on the free version, so I haven't really forked out the money to try the paid version. If anybody has, I'd be curious to see how you like it. But it's a free app available to use maps, create boundaries, track locations, put markers down so you can find a spot again in your woods when you go back out to it. And what I really like, because I live in Hocking County, is that you don't need cell service to track your location. So even with absolutely no service, you are able to track where you are on your map and track locations, put pins in with GPS coordinates, and all of these things that you can do with a GPS on your phone. So I actually have not used a GPS in probably 5 years because I've been using Avenza instead. And so I've used this app because I have my phone on me all the time. I already have it. I don't have to carry something else. I don't have to worry about extra batteries, except in the winter, if you are using this, I will tell you that it will drain your cell phone battery. So if you plan on using it a lot, one of those external battery packs will get you through the course of the day. Otherwise, mine would last until about lunchtime, and then I'd have to charge it again. So it will drain your phone battery in cold weather. But it seems to be just fine in the summer. Probably depends on your personal cell phone, how old it is, how well the battery works, and things like that. But with this, you do have several options. And so Eric provided a really good intro to start getting into this. But you can take a map that a natural resources professional has made for you, as long as it is georeferenced, meaning that it just has baseline GPS coordinates associated with it. I don't know how all of that works, but if it's created in certain programs like ArcMap, you can create a PDF that has that referenced, pull it directly into this app, and use it as a normal map. If that's not an option for you, so maybe you don't have those maps created, or the professional that you're working with doesn't have the right program to create the PDF, there are maps that you can download in the app. Some of those are free, some of them you pay for, and there are a lot of options for different types of maps that you can pull in. So for this presentation today, I've actually taken a whole bunch of screenshots of my phone while I'm using this app. We're going to try and work through some simple things that you may want to do with it on your own property to map, mark locations, track your trails, just the main features that I use most on this app. The first thing is adding your map, actually getting that map for your location into your cell phone. And again, there are two ways to do this. One is you may have a map. If you're involved in a program like EQIP or CSP with Natural Resources Conservation Service, or even Ohio Forest Tax Law, or you just work with a professional like Eric at the Soil and Water Office, you may have a map that they have created of your property that you can import from your email. So we're going to start going through some screenshots. If I need to slow down, let me know. And Dave, I can't see the chat box anymore, so you'll just have to let me know if something pops up. But when you go into the app, well, actually, I'm not even going into the app yet. So I'm going to go into my email. And
Stephanie, I want to remind them, I'm going to pop in the chat window. Stephanie has detailed directions on how to use Avenza that she created, and she has a copy of this PowerPoint. So I'm going to drop that back in the chat window. So if you want those, you should be able to get to them.
Thank you. One thing to note is those directions I wrote out are for a specific version of Avenza. So as they update, things will change a little bit, but it should still give you general guidance on how to do these different actions that I'm showing you today. So I have in my email a map that I emailed myself. So I created a map of my property in ArcMap. It's georeferenced, email it to myself, and I have this file here that I can tap to download. Once I click on that, it's going to give me a preview of the map. In this preview page, there's a little export button down at the bottom that I can click, and it brings up a screen of different options of where I want this map to go. One of those options, if you have Avenza downloaded to your phone, is to copy to Avenza Maps. So when I click copy to Avenza Maps, it automatically opens the Avenza app. And as you can see here, this map has shown up in my maps on Avenza. Now I have quite a few different maps on here, different projects that I've been working on. So it shows up as more than one. This is the first time you're using the app. You will have the map you just downloaded and the getting started map. But as you add, they start to filter into this My Maps category. The biggest limitation that I have found with the free version of this app is you can only add 3 created maps at a time. So you can download as many as you want from their store, but the maps that are made outside of the app that you bring in personally, you're limited to 3 active at a time. So you can swap those out, you can exchange them, but you are working with only 3. And if you're only working on your property, that's not going to be a big issue. Some of the work that I've done on state forests, we've wanted 4 maps at a time just to swap projects. And then it gets a little trickier because you have to keep swapping out your maps as you change areas. But then when I open it, I have this PDF version of a map that I can zoom in on, I can expand. What I have drawn out on this map are different stands for my forest, and these are not exactly correct. I just drew them really quick to have an example to work with for today. But each different color there represents a different forest stand. And so if I'm working in stand C, I can actually track my location within stand C and know when I leave that area, as long as I'm using this map on my phone. Now, if you do not have a pre-made map, you can get maps from the Avenza store. And you can get a free map for just about every area. So I've not had a problem finding a free map to cover anywhere that I'm looking for within Avenza. There are other maps that are available. One of the really cool things that I like is we like to travel. We go to a lot of national parks, and there are really good national park maps that you can purchase in Avenza, have on your phone and without cell service, know the different trails, know how long those trails are, and track where you are on them. So that's a really cool feature that doesn't necessarily apply to your woodlands. But if you like to travel, you may be able to find recreational maps for national parks, forests, different areas for wherever you're going. Most of those you will pay for though, but they're pretty similar to what you would buy in a gift shop. For a trail map on paper, it's just on your phone and it will track where you are. But if you're buying or downloading a map from the store, you have that My Maps page that we were looking at before. This is where my imported map went to. But this time, instead of importing a map, I'm going to click the little plus sign at the top. And this is going to take me to add a map to My Maps page. You have a lot of different options. So you can import a map, and I'm going to get a map from the store. So they have maps for just about everywhere. So when I click on this Get a Map from the Store, it's going to take you to this page of categories. So you can look through all these different categories: recreation, tourism, professional, education. There are a ton of different types of maps. The easiest way I have found to get a map for where you are is to click on the little search at the top, and that will take you to an actual map. You notice that blue circle in the middle? That is my location, and it shows me these maps that are available surrounding where I am. If you do not want to pay for a map, you can click on this little funnel up here that is a filter. It will open a new screen, maybe. And there's this nice little tab you can highlight to show free maps only. It gets rid of the others from that display on the map. You only see the free maps. And then you can go back to your map, pick the one that's closest to you, and it will show you what that map is. So it'll give you a little bit of information. The orange highlighted area there is the area that is covered by this particular map. And if you click on, well, actually that's just little dots. You notice there's actually two pins there. There are two different maps that I could select for this area. Usually there's a historical map, and then this one here that's a TNMGE ... That's one I usually do because it's aerial and it has topo overlaid on it. But if you click on the little information button, it will give you some information about it. So what the layer is, the area that's covered, what the extent is, and any different information. And here it says installed for me. If you have not already installed it, it will say install. You can click on that and it will download it to your phone. Once it says it's installing, you can go back to My Maps at the bottom, and it will take you back to your map window where this newly downloaded map will now show up. And so now you have something to work with within your phone. Once you have the map, that's when you can actually start going out and working with it on your property and start tracking the different things that you want to. There are a lot of things that you can do with this app. I am only going to highlight some of the top things that I use most frequently. So if you get it and if you start using it, play around with the different options, see what you're able to do. But some of the most common things that I use the app for are to add tracks. This is basically, you can set it to record where you go, as long as you carry your phone with you. And you can actually start your tracks, click the home screen to shut your phone to a blank screen, stick it in your pocket and keep going. And it will track you while you're going. So if you're going out and you're walking your trails, or you're riding your trails, or you want to walk your boundary, if you turn this on at the start, it will actually keep track of everywhere you go, and you can create a map that shows all of your trails or your boundary or whatever it is that you're walking, so you can have later. So this is a photo from the actual app. So I'm on that map that I just downloaded, that free map on Avenza. And you can see this little blue circle is where I am. So when I started putting this together, I was sitting in my living room, so that little blue circle covers up my house. And it will actually move with me as I go. Now, if I go to those three little dots at the bottom that are circled, so let's see if I can get my mouse going. I have these three dots. If I click on that, it will bring up a menu of different things that I can do. I'm going to draw and measure. I don't have that correct. Sorry, my circle should actually be a little bit lower. We're going to record GPS tracks. I might have to fix that, Dave. Have you put that in? So we're going to record GPS tracks. I'm guessing I moved the picture and the circle didn't move with it. But if you record GPS tracks, it will bring up this tracking screen. And as long as you're on tracking, it will show you're ready to track as long as your satellites are locked and it knows your location. And you can click this Start Tracking button when you're ready to go. Now, I went out and I walked one of my trails. And so you can see this orange line is where I have walked. And as I move, it's just keeping this orange line going. And the blue dot is updating to my location as we go. And it will also keep track of your speed, the distance that you've walked, how long you've been walking. And then for the length of the track, we'll do your average speed. I did this walk with my 8-year-old. We did a whole lot of stopping to look at things. So it took us a while to walk the trail, but it kept track as we were moving. Our speed was just a little slower, which was good. We had fun. You can pause tracking. So say you're going out and you want to stop and explore something you just saw, but you don't want those tracks recorded. If you hit the pause button, you can go do whatever you want to do. And then when you start back on the trail you were on, click start again. It will pick right back up. But when you're done, you do have to stop tracking. So I have done this before where I go out and I work all day. I track where I'm working. I forget to stop tracking and it goes home with me. So you do have to actually remember to stop tracking. And you just click the stop tracking button. It will ask if you're sure. Say yes. And when you're done, you have this nice track of where you go. So this is one of my trails in my woods. You can see I put a couple pins as I was going just to mark some things to use for this example. But I now have a GPS record of my trail. It goes back to the back of our property. It will tell you how long that trail is. So this one was 0.2 miles and give you some other information. Sorry, my people are hiding my screen, so I'm gonna try and move that. But now I have track 1, 0.21 miles, and it took us 7 minutes and 15 seconds to walk it. So that way you can get your trails. I was hoping to get a few more trails, I just ran out of time. But you can actually do this on all of the trails on your property, save them as different tracks, and you have all of your different trails mapped out. Now, another thing that I had on that map were some points. So you can drop pins or place marks to mark locations of important features in your woods on your map. You notice I had a few on there, and I'll probably pull it up here again, but I marked some invasive plants. I marked a vernal pool that I want to be able to monitor. And then the end of our trail there is a recessed cave. And so I marked that to have it on there, and our son named it, so it's Joshua's Cave. So if you notice that place mark name, that's actually the given name of our cave now. But with this, we're going to start back on that main map page. So you see my location again. There is one really important thing to keep in mind when you're dropping pins. You see these little crosshairs that are gray in the center of the map. If those crosshairs are not on where you are, as in on that blue dot, it will drop a pin where the crosshairs are, not where you are. So this is something that took me a while to get used to. I'd drop a pin and then wonder why it was half a mile away. But you have to make sure you click the little arrow at the bottom to center it on your location. If you click that, it'll move those crosshairs to cover your blue dot, and then you're good. If you want to mark a pin somewhere, so you're standing on the trail and you see Tree of Heaven 50 yards up the hill, you can actually use your fingers to move the map, put the crosshairs where you want the pin, and drop a pin there, and you don't have to walk to it. But then you have to remember to click the arrow to put it back on top of you so that the next time you want to drop a pin, it's where you are located. But then you're going to click the little.
Stephanie, you have a question from Pamela. What happens if I walk a half mile after hitting pause and then hit unpause?
It won't track that last half mile. It will start tracking again whenever you hit unpause. So wherever you are when you hit unpause, it will start from that location to track you, and you won't have any of that half mile recorded. I tend to not use the pause. I just deal with it because I'm really bad at remembering to click unpause. My memory is shot, so I just tend to let it go and deal with a little bit of wandering. If you're using some programs, you can edit it a little bit. I don't know if it's an option in Google Earth, but I know you can remove some of those points it drops and take them out of your final product. But yeah, if you forget to unpause, it's not going to track what you wanted it to, unfortunately. If we go back to dropping a pin, we're going to click on the little pin icon, and it will bring up a screen to add a place mark. Now, there are a lot of different things on here you can do. So like for one, you can rename it. This one in the title, I renamed it to Vernal Pool because that's what I wanted to add a pin for on my property. You can change your symbols. You can actually color them differently on your map. If you want different things to show up as different colors, little dots give you more options. But maybe you want to mark all of your invasives in red, and you want to mark these really cool areas in blue to separate them out when you're looking at your map. But you can change that symbol, change the name. And then the cool thing I just tried yesterday when I was out getting this is you can actually add photos of what you are dropping a pin of in here. And so here I added a photo of Joshua's Cave so that it shows up on my map with a picture. And it's then referenced to that pin, and you have the coordinates with it, and you're able to kind of tie that picture to the feature on your property. Or maybe you see a plant that you don't know what it is. You can drop a pin and take pictures of it, and you know what the plant was at that location so that when you identify it, you can go back and figure out those problems. Once you're done, you then click submit, and it will show up as a pin on your page. And apparently I didn't have that one. But if we go back a little bit, you can see on this map here, I have a red pin here, a blue pin was my water feature, my vernal pool, and then I have wonderful Amur cork tree. Invasive, we had a couple we missed treating here, so I dropped a pin as we walked for that. But then it'll show up with all these little identifiers. If you don't like these cluttering your map, all you have to do is use your finger to click outside of that and they will disappear. And then when you want to see it again, you click on the pin and it'll pop up the name and the information bubble. If you want any of that information, like your name or a picture or anything, you want to change it later, you click on the little eye, it will bring up that same screen for adding your pin. It'll bring this back up and it'll have all your information. You can edit whatever you want to, add a picture, do what you need to, and then submit again, and it will update that pin. Now, if you bring all of this in, you mark all of your trails, you add your invasive species, you mark some really special interest places, you can just leave those on your phone in Avenza and they'll stay tied to that map. If you want to use another program and create a map, you can export the features that you collect on your app to use with Google Earth, ArcMap, different programs that are available. We're going to talk a little bit about Google Earth because Dave's going to do a recording on how to use Google Earth to map your woodlands to tie with this. And so you can actually collect all these points, all of your tracks, export them, and bring them into Google Earth to make a map. So if you want to export your features, you're on your main map page. You can see I have 4 features here. I have a track and 3 points. If I want to send these to Google Earth, it's not advancing. Oh, here we go. I'm going to collect the little pin with the lines. This is my layers menu. This is going to bring up a list of everything that I have saved on this map, or I've added to this map. So you can see I have my cork tree, Joshua's Cave, the track, and vernal pool. I want to export it, I'm going to click the little box with the arrow pointing out at the bottom. And it's going to give me an option to export to others or airdrop. I have not had great luck with airdropping. You have to have the same everything with the person that you're sharing it with. So the same system in iOS, the same Avenza version, everything has to be the same for it to work. But the export to others is what we're going to do here. And it'll bring up this settings for what you want to export. You can change the file name to whatever you want. You can change your format. You can only pick some of the features to send, or you can just send them all. So one thing to keep in mind is this format. If you're going to use Google Earth, it has to be saved as a KML, or else it will not work with the system when you go to import it into Google Earth. If you have a handheld GPS that you use, you can actually export it as a GPS file and import it into your GPS, depending on how good you are with your system. But there are different formats. If you're using Google Earth, make sure it's KML. I have a track on mine. I can actually choose to export it as a track, which when I show up on Google Earth will actually show up as a bunch of little dots because it takes a point every 5-10 seconds. And that's how it keeps track of you. Or you can change that to export it as a line. And it will be one continuous line instead of a bunch of little dots. And that I just learned while I was putting this presentation together. So I saw that when I added the screenshot and tried it out, and it looks like you can either do your dots as a track or export it as a line. And Dave and I had been talking about that and how to get it to actually go as a line. So that would be your option for that. And once you have your settings set, you can click export so that you can see here I changed my file name to Downs Trail. It's a KML. I'm exporting it as a track. And you're going to click this export button. Oh. And it will ask you how you want to share the file. So you typically want to email it. So you click your mail button. You can send it to yourself. So it shows up in your email. Then when you're on your computer with Google Earth, you would go to your email, save the file, and bring it into Google Earth. And Dave will talk more about that on the Google Earth PowerPoint that he is recording. But click mail, it'll insert the file into an email, type whatever you want into it, click send, and you have your files on your computer. On the flip side, you can also create data in Google Earth and share it with Avenza. And so if you work in Google Earth to start with, maybe you trace your boundary lines, you have a few stands, you have some information that you do on the computer in Google Earth, you can add it to Avenza. You're going to email it to yourself, just like we're doing with everything so far. And when you open your email, you should have a KML file. When you click to get the preview of the file, it'll bring up this nice, fancy, horrible looking document. Freaked me out the first time I saw it, but you just kind of leave it as that and click your export, just like we downloaded a map. And it will bring up different options. You're going to copy to Avenza, and it will open Avenza and add it to the map you have active. The one thing I've learned is you want to make sure in Avenza you have your property map as the main screen before you add Google Earth documents. And then once you do that, it will add it to your map and you'll have those features. And it didn't look any different because I had actually exported from Avenza, Dave put it into Google Earth and then resent it to me. But I was able to add it back into my map from that KML file. Another thing you can do with Avenza is you can measure distance and area. And so maybe you don't want to track where you are going, but you want to know how long a section of trail is. You can draw out that section of trail and get your distance, or you can figure out the area of an space that you're looking at in your woods. So on your main map, we're actually going to click these three little dots at the bottom, and we get this nice screen again. This time we actually are going to draw and measure, not record our GPS tracks. So we're going to draw and measure, and it will bring up a screen here that shows feet, And you're going to use your crosshairs to put on the starting point. So I actually started here. Use your finger to click the screen once. It will drop a point, and then you drag your map so that your crosshairs are over your ending location. So this is my line that I'm looking at here. You can see it's 589.72 feet. If you want an area, so I actually just continued this. I drug my crosshairs out, dropped another point out here, and then dropped a point back at the beginning to close the polygon. Down at the bottom, there is this triangle thing. If you click that, it switches from distance to area. And so it will do a three-part distance of your lines to start with. Once you click that triangle, it'll shade it in and give you the area instead of your distance up here. And there's our triangle. The other thing here is they may not give you acres to start with. They may give you square feet or something else. If you click on these fancy little lines, it'll bring up an option here where you can change colors. You can change the units. So you can change it to feet, you can change it to miles. You can change this one to acres or any other unit that you want to measure. Change your fill colors. One thing I like is you can actually use this slider here to make it 0%, and it will not shade in your feature. It will just give you the boundary if you're looking at an area. So I find it hard to look through some of these colors and actually see my map behind it. So if I'm drawing an area on a map, I'll usually make that 0 so that I can see everything behind it, and it just gives me the outline. So this is one of those things you just kind of play with. When you're done drawing it out, you have two options. You can either click the check marks to save it, and it will save as a feature on your map. Another limitation of the free version, you can't export these. You can only export the things that you drop a pin or track. So it won't export your areas, but it will save it to your Avenza map. So if you want it for reference later on, click the check mark, it'll save it as a layer on your map, and it will be there in the future when you look at it. If you just wanted to know it right now, you don't need to keep it in the future. You click the little X and it disappears, and it takes you back out of the menu. But you can either choose to save it or just get the data temporarily and then get rid of it so it's not cluttering up your map. Now, other things with the Avenza app, so I have used this to draw stands in a woodland just to use in the field. Again, it won't export to Google Earth, but it saves on that map in Avenza, and so you can come back there and use it. So if I know that I want to work in certain areas, I can draw those out pretty quickly in Avenza and have them to use in the field. You can track your invasive plants. So a lot of people know they have invasives in their woods and they're scattered, but they don't always find them again later on. So if you're carrying this with you and you happen to run across something like my amber cork tree, drop a pin, and then you can actually navigate back to that point using the app to get back to the area that you want to return to. Track your special features, your trails, anything else you want to drop a location for in your woodlands. If you all have the same version and you all have iPhones, you can airdrop with each other. You can also share through email. So if multiple people in the family are doing work in the woods, you can all track things on your phone and then share it with each other so you have the same data. And then the other thing is, if you're doing work in your woods, and I know invasive plants is one of the big ones, you might be working in a 10-acre stand. You might tackle a little bit on different days. If you set this to track you while you work, you will know where you have been every day that you are out working and what areas you have left to do in that stand. And that's one huge thing that I use this for, is just to keep track of where I've been when I'm doing work in my woods. And so if I have a 10-acre stand, it's very easy then, when I come back 2 weeks after I've started, to know where I picked up 5 days ago and keep doing the work right where I needed to, and not worry about trying to make sure I'm correct on a paper map and shading it in and things like that. So that is really one really good, useful use for this app.
Stephanie, it also, I liked what you said there. It also can help you get an idea of how much ground you can cover in a day, to have a better idea of, all right, I can do a half an acre of invasive plant management in one day. So you know how many more days you might have in a 10-acre spot.
Which can be good or bad.
Yeah, you might be like, all right, contractor, here we go.
Yep.
Another thing to touch on, you talking about sharing it with your family or things like that between, if you're sharing your trails or something. One thing I've came to find is like some of the lease hunters or hunters, you can share those stand locations or trail locations or bedding areas or the sanctuary area to stay out of. There's so many different uses that you can find for it. So just wanted to add a couple things there with you.
Yeah. Yep. And
I agree, Eric. I've got a gentleman that hunts on me occasionally, and we have a hard time communicating just with him verbally describing where his tree stand is or where he's going to be hunting that day. So you have this Avenza as a tool, or even just a regular map, but it's a great way to communicate with anybody that's on your property, including your forester that you're working with, to say, hey, I found this plant. Can you go out and look at it? Here's where it is. Or any of those things can be a great tool.
And I have been amazed with how accurate it is with your location. So we've used this treating hemlocks in the Hocking Hills, and we will be down in gorges where even GPS receivers have trouble. And it's pretty good at tracking your location in those areas without cell service.
Did you touch on that, Stephanie, that you don't have to have the cell service for that at all? There's a couple times I was typing, so I didn't catch all of it.
Yes, at the beginning of the presentation.
All right, perfect.
Yeah, so I don't have cell service most of the time when I'm out in the woods. And as long as you download your map while you have service, you're good to go. You do need cell service to get the maps. I guess that's one important thing I didn't mention, is you have to have that service to download your maps. But once your map's downloaded, you're good to go.
It seems really scary to most people, watching this video, I'd assume. And
I know.
It really isn't. We promise that looks like a lot, but we tried to give you every little micro step. But it is fairly user-friendly once you get in there and play around with it a little bit and get familiarized with it. Same with the auditor's website. Same with just about anything technology related. You just got to familiarize yourself with it and realize that it's a really helpful tool that is fairly simple.
Yeah.
And
Dave
the
shared
only
the
way
link.
to learn it, go ahead. But
Oh,
the only
Dave
way to
shared
really
a
learn
link.
it, we're on topic. Go ahead.
They've shared a link to a folder that has this PowerPoint, so you can kind of work through it. But there's also a PDF document that I had quite a few people asking me what the steps were for different things. So I actually wrote them out. And so that document is, I think, 2 pages. You could print it front back and just have a reference copy. Just keep in mind it will change a little bit as they update the app, as your version changes. But that's just kind of a step-by-step for each of these things that I've worked through. It may have a couple other things I can't remember. But I made that up when multiple people were asking me again how to drop a pin or change the name. So that was just useful to send and have them work through on their own. Sorry, Dave. You're muted.
Trying the old spacebar trick and it wasn't working for me. I was on the wrong screen, but I just put it in there again. So click on that link. It should take you to a box folder and you should be able to download those directions. The other thing is, after we do this and I get those new recordings up, we'll put all that information on the blog site, which I'm going to share with you as we speak too. So
We got a couple
lots of good stuff.
I don't know if you want to save those to the end or grab them now.
You can grab them now.
The first one says, can you download map from County Auditor's website into Avenza? That I have not tried. I don't believe so.
I don't know. I haven't tried it either.
I have not tried that. That'd be a good one to try and figure out and let us get back to you on. I haven't tried that, but most of everything I do is I download the information into my GIS system and then export it all as one. Most of what the auditor has for you to be able to download is features like contours or streams or roadways or an aerial photograph. They don't really have a overall map for you to download into. It's mostly features. So you have to take those features and create that map, which is where you probably most likely want to call in the professional, like, hey, can you create that for me real quick, and give you that format that you can upload into the program itself. And that was for Neil. There's one from Frank says, I tried getting map of Tuscarawas County, but none seem to show up in store. And I believe that's where you're trying to locate your maps. And I'm assuming on an Avenza, you just need to zoom in further. That's some of the issues I've had with it when I'm trying to get those maps. And also make sure you keep clicking until you find a free one, unless you're wanting to buy one. Because I'm with Stephanie.
Yeah.
I don't put any money into it yet. And I've always got what I needed.
That filter to only show free maps is really useful. It took me a while to find that. But yeah, zoom in, zoom out a little bit, give it a minute for the pins to update with the available maps. Those quadrangle maps like I was using for my example should be available for every section of Ohio, or it should be available for every section of the United States.
And make sure you have service too. They probably
Yeah.
won't show up if you don't have service. So make sure you have good service or Wi-Fi. That'll help those pop up as well. And then Alan Frederick asks, do you still use GPS tracking when you don't have cell service? My experience. Yeah.
Yep. It will track you whether you have service or not. You can start the tracks without service. You can end the tracks without service, and it will function just the same.
It uses latitude, longitude coordinates. It doesn't.
Yeah. It's somehow connected to satellites like your GPS receiver would be. So if you have an old phone, it may not work. That is one thing, that if your phone is really old, it might not have the capability to connect for GPS, but most of the newer phones will.
So the only time you need cell service or internet access is when you're in that phase of uploading and downloading maps, correct?
That is correct. Or if you want to export your features, it's an
Right.
email, so you need service for that.
So you can use almost everything without cell service, which is pretty amazing, because I had the same problem. The other thing I wanted to add is that I have not used GPS in years, and I just dove in and downloaded Avenza, and it didn't take long. You just got to jump in and play with the features, and it's amazing if you can't figure something out, if you get on a computer and do a Google search, or in Stephanie's little directions that she provided will be a big help to that. So don't be afraid to jump in.
And I'm sure if you can't figure it out, get a hold of one of us. We'll gladly walk you through it. We might not be able to show you in person for now, but I've helped a lot of my landowners. They're like, hey, I tried it out. I just couldn't figure it out. And I we'll provide you step-by-step processes that aren't already provided here, or we'll help sit there and talk you and walk you through it. We're here to help out whenever we can.
So did we get all the questions answered?
As far as I've seen.
Okay. We've got one other wrap-up little presentation that we're going to do, and I'm going to share a screen here so you guys can keep talking until I'm set up if we have other questions, but I'm going to.
There's a question now that asking if Avenza maps you download have property lines on them. I haven't found any that do. But yes, your boundary lines are a really good starting point before you add features. And with Google Earth, I think Dave's going to talk a little bit about trying to draw your property lines, and then you can export it to Avenza and add that to your map. But it's more difficult on Avenza to do that. There is a way you can add property lines. Just stay tuned for additional presentations.
Okay, I'm going to find the right thing to share here with you folks. Are folks seeing the PowerPoint now?
Yeah.
I get some head shaking.
Sure.
Okay, and everybody can hear me okay? So we are going to talk about a couple options. Again, my name's Dave Apsley. I'm a natural resource specialist with OSU Extension, and I coordinate the Day in the Woods program with all of our partners, including some of the folks that are on today, the folks from the local Soil and Waters Division of Forestry and so on. So I want to just talk a little bit about, and I'm going to invite Eric and Stephanie to just jump in whenever you want to, but a couple of things to explore. So Avenza is a tool that we've shared with you that you can collect information in the field and bring it to a map, or you can take information from a map and take it to the field. I want to talk about a couple other tools. And the first one is My Land Plan. My Land Plan is a tool that's out there. It's free. It's mylandplan.org. You log in and it'll create, you can create basically a planning tool for your property. My Land Plan is a program that is developed and managed by the American Forest Foundation. And those are the folks that run the American Tree Farm system. You don't have to be a tree farmer to use it, an official tree farmer, but it's a tool that they provide. And it's got, if you are a tree farmer, it's got some supplemental stuff out there too. So you just log into mylandplan.org and hit the Get Started button and create you an account. And it's really simple. I'm going to do a full presentation, about 30-minute recording of how all the ins and outs of my land plan that'll be available on our website here shortly. It'll probably be early to mid next week before that's up and available. Actually tried to do some of it this week and it was down for a little while, so I wasn't able to do everything I wanted to do with it. But here's some of the things that I think are the pros and cons of my land plan. First of all, it's free and it's comprehensive. So it includes a lot of features that are really cool. And we'll go into those here in a little bit. It's got the ability to do mapping of your property. The parcel boundaries are usually available there. So you can actually go see property boundaries and trace them on and create your property. But it's also got some things that you normally don't get with a mapping program. Places to put down your goals and the activities you're doing. You can do things like journaling. You can actually take pictures of things you're doing and upload them into those journals. Have a task list, like from your management plan of, gosh, I need to do stilt grass control. Oh, gosh, it's already October. It's probably too late, right, Eric? See if he's listening to me. But you can keep track of tasks, and if you really interact with this thing, and I haven't done as good as I should, it's a way to keep up with your woodland property and things that you need to do. There are built-in tutorials on just about everything you start to do. A tutorial pop up, and you can play it. And then if you are a tree farmer, all the resources for their for your management planning and your tree farm stuff is all there, including foresters who are actively involved with my land plan that you can click on and communicate with. The only negative I really see is that you can't import GPS data. So you got a map, you've got an aerial image, and there's only one choice really. You can turn it on or off, but you can't get the very latest imagery and you can't always get the oldest imagery. So you're kind of stuck with what they've got. But you do have an image of your property that if you're familiar with your property, you can actually navigate and work with. So it's mylandplan.org. I thought I had a screen capture of it, but I don't, of my property. It's really a neat program to keep track, and you can trace boundaries on say an open field. It'll give you acreages. You can trace a path that you know where it is, and it'll give you distances, and it keeps tables of all that stuff. So it's really a neat program. If you're not on the My Land Plan yet, I highly recommend just going on there and playing with it. I will also include some pretty detailed instructions on how to use My Land Plan in the talk that I'm going to record here shortly.
I like the journaling aspect of it because you can add in a lot of pictures. Like, for instance, the reason I've really enjoyed it is I've got a very unique property that will have some very visual impacts relatively quick. And I've been able to basically record and journal photo differences and attach those into the areas and of stands that, you know, stand one, I've got invasive control going on. It was a big giant autumn olive patch, and then I went through and cleared it, and now it's a big giant opening with a little bit of junk in it, and now I've gone through and cleared some of the junk. And so you can kind of journal those differences. So that's what's kind of cool with that I've been utilizing for myself.
Yep. And if you are a tree farmer and you want to keep track of your activities, or you're in a program like forest tax law and you want to document what you've done, I mean, it's just a great place to do it. And the tools are pretty cool. Like I said, you can trace boundaries of things, get acreages. You can zoom in on small areas and put boundaries on them and figure out the acreage. So got an area you need to seed, or you got an area you need to fertilize, you can calculate. Or if you need to build fence or whatever, it's just a really neat tool. And once it's in there, it's in there, and you can toggle them on and off and print maps and do all kinds of really neat stuff with My Land Plan. And I'm not seeing the chat window. I got too many windows open. So if you guys see any questions, let me know and we can try to answer those. Just read them out to me if you want anytime. Another program I've been playing with is Google Earth. It's freeware. You can zoom in, and there's the link, googleearth.com or google.com/earth. And I've found you've actually got there's a phone app too, so you can get a lot of features and track where you are on a map with GPS with Google Earth too, and you've got some measurement features similar to Avenza. So if you're a little nervous with Avenza, you could also jump into Google Earth and play with it. Pro, it's free and you can use it for mapping. Stephanie emailed me her files and I was able to pull them up and see where she walked yesterday with Joshua. And so it's really neat. You can import and export GIS, GPS data. You've got lots of older images available too. So you can turn, for me, if I'm trying to map a boundary of a forest stand that, tell the difference between the pine stand and the hardwood stand, I can go back to an old black and white photo and usually pick that up, or a winter photo, pick that up. So Google Earth Pro's got lots of advantages. The really frustrating thing for me, and I don't understand why it doesn't have it, but parcel boundaries do not pop up in Google Earth, or at least I haven't figured out how to do that. There's an end around I'm going to discuss in the video we're going to do, but if you're trying to find your property boundaries on Google Earth, you can't really do it without going to Google Maps and exporting to Google Earth, which seems ridiculous. But it is essentially a mapping program only. It is a little more complicated. To me, it's not as intuitive as my land plan. So if you're really not comfortable with GIS and GPS and you just want something simple to start working with, I'd probably recommend my land plan as your starting point to play with some of this software. Eric or Stephanie, you have anything to add on that or recommendations?
If it's all confusing, just get a hold of one of us. We'll help you get a map.
But here is on my property, things that I've all taken from Avenza and put on Google Earth. So there's an image of my property. I was actually able to go to Google Maps, and the yellow line is what the property line is officially in the auditor's office. The blue line is where my fence is located. And you can see we got a little property issue down on the southern part. There's a historic fence that's been there for 3 or 4 landowners prior to me, but it's important to know those differences and where they are and how to deal with them. But you can see you can get pretty good data. And when I walk my boundary, other than that southern boundary, you can see it pretty well lays right on top of what the auditor says is out there. And then you can drop pins and put related information with it. The information you get from Avenza, at least I hadn't figured out exactly how to do it as far as areas. It'll give you a linear distance if you click on it, but aerial distance, you might have to trace it again and create a polygon to get the area. But that's all detail that we'll provide later. But you can see you can create a pretty detailed map with Google Earth. And again, that's all free. For me, GIS is something that I've dabbled in since about 1990. And I've struggled with it because if you get into these real geographic information systems, if you don't use them regularly, they are very complicated and hard to use. But there is some free stuff out there. So I wanted to mention, if you really want to dive in, probably the one that is most familiar to people that in the forestry community uses this thing called QGIS. I actually just did a Google search for free GIS programs, and this Indiana University page popped up. As an Indiana native and a Purdue graduate, it was hard to share a Indiana webpage with you, but there are some links with information on how to get some of this free GIS software. The one I learned on is actually GRASS, G-R-A-S-S, which was developed by the Department of Army and the Army Corps of Engineers. It was one of the, if not the first GIS program out there. It was a nightmare to learn, but I would really not recommend diving into GIS too deeply. I would recommend sticking to the Google Earth and the Avenza. And then if you're comfortable with that, then you may take the next step. But I put this up in case you have another background in GIS and wanted to know where you might be able to get some freeware. And then this is the one, again, a free download that you can get if you're interested in that. And then I'm going to turn it over to Eric to let him talk about ONX maps, since he's more familiar with it than I am.
So with this one, it's kind of a commercial, but we're not trying to sell you on it. It's just something that I have found through my time working with landowners that since this app came out, a lot of folks have been utilizing this. Some as hunters, some as not. I've got some folks that have got this app literally just so they could find the boundaries of their own property. This app is a mapping program. Essentially, it eliminates you having to go through all the steps to have that interactive map right there with you. Some of the problems I've seen with it is unless you have it all downloaded when you have service, which is about the same with everything else, you won't really get, you won't be able to pull up any of the maps or anything like that if you don't have good service. So it comes down to pre-planning, getting those maps on there. This one does cost money. I've got it pulled up that 1 year for just one singular state is $29 for the entire year. That's not horrible, but I'm not going to try to encourage anybody to spend money. That's why I go with Avenza mapping, because it's free. And if you really got into this and you're one of those avid hikers, or you really go out across multiple states, for $100, you can have the elite version of this, and it still provides you all of the, it can show you who the landowners are. It can show you access points. You can map in a lot of your own points with it. It's pretty user-friendly app as well. But again, this is one that's you got to pay for it. But it's what I've seen a lot of my landowners when I'm sitting there, I show up with the map in hand and they're like, oh, well, I've got this ONX hunt and this is how I've been doing it this whole time. So that's one of the ways that I've seen, or one of the things I've seen landowners utilizing to help them with this, mapping your woodland, mapping your hunting spots, mapping your hiking spots or your scenic spots, your invasives, any of that. But really it's just coming down to whatever fits you. Some, Avenza works well for me. Some it may not work well for others. But this is just another one of those versions you can utilize.
And probably the biggest advantage it has out of the box, if the parcel boundaries are available out there to the public, they're already on ONX maps. So that's an advantage, but there's always end arounds to get that on your Avenza map. So I would recommend trying Avenza because it's freeware and starting there.
I recommend Avenza to all of my landowners since I learned about it. I basically, every time a landowner calls me out to a site visit on their property, I create a map, I email it to them and myself, and then I upload it into my Avenza mapping, and I give them a somewhat step-by-step process on how to upload it themselves if they wanted to before, or I give them the option that I'll help them on site if they have everything downloaded.
Great. So I have not been following the chat or Q&A when I was presenting. I just got too many windows to keep up with. So how are we? I see there's 3 questions in the Q&A. So let me pop those up.
I think we answered those.
Got those ones.
Yeah, I think they're all answered.
We have a couple more about getting maps. I'm trying to see if I can share my phone screen.
Okay, we'll keep
and
talking.
See if I
and
can
you
walk
work on
through that. I have to remember how to do it.
I see a comment from Russell about Hunt Stand is another great free that may have property boundaries. Hunt Stand, I'm not familiar with that. Are you, Eric?
I haven't heard much about it. I have heard of it from some landowners that they utilize. I think it's kind of like the same thing almost as ONX, but it's a free version.
Okay. And while Stephanie's still working on that, I'll remind you that everybody that's on this webinar or who even registered, once we get all the resources posted from today, including today's recording, any supplemental things, links, I always create a post from the day and we'll have the recordings and everything there. And they'll all be on our Southeast Ohio Woods webpage, which I'll share that link again with you.
Looks like
Okay,
I
I'm
might be
seeing
good.
something pop.
Okay.
Cool.
So this is actually me working through it on my phone. So we'll see how this works. But when I go to add to the map store here, this is what I see. So you guys can see if this is any different from what you see. But I can actually, and sorry, I have to remember to click my phone, not my screen. Go to find maps. And this is what mine does. So it takes me to this map. And initially it will tell me that it's too wide. There's too many options. So if you zoom in, it should pop up some of these little dots. If you're not seeing these dots, try clicking this list button up here. If you have it, it won't show you where they are. That's the one drawback. But it will give you a list of maps in the area that are near where you are that you might be able to find them this way. Somebody have to tell me if they see this. Again, I still have my free one. I mean, if they're trying it on their phone, sorry. If they were one of the ones having trouble finding the app, or finding the map. This list is another one.
A good key too is you really need to know the quadrangle that you're in and recognize that name for where your property is. And you might have multiples that cross over on your property, but if you do a Google search, you can find that. This
is the filter up here. The other thing to check might be that these are checked. If you can find the filter, make sure you actually have the types of maps to display. If none of these are checked, it's not going to bring up any maps for you. So I always leave all of those checked. It'll show me all the different types, but then I leave this free maps on. If I turn the free maps off, I should get a whole lot more pop up for charges. And you can see they're not, most of the maps aren't that expensive if you want some. Okay, so somebody says map I want is not near where I am. I called up map and scrolled to the correct area. Okay, that would be a little more difficult. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm clicking my computer screen again. Okay, so you went to the map. I'm guessing you scrolled to where you want to see. Let's just try out Mansfield. See, mine still pop up. Well, that area, it's only showing me one paid map.
And sometimes I've noticed with Avenza, that precise area might not have a map, but some maps cover a much larger scale than some others. So one you might get in covering an entire county versus one that covers only a quadrangle. I've seen that, so sometimes that might be why you're not seeing any there. But if you're not seeing any of these blue dots, I've seen the chat that it just popped up that never seen those blue markers, then I would assume possibly your service is fairly weak or you don't have good connection to Wi-Fi, because that's the reason you have to be able to download these first before you go into the field. If you don't have good service or Wi-Fi, then those aren't going to populate in here for you to choose a map to be able to download.
That would be my guess as well. I don't know
when
how
you're in
good
this
your
mode,
service is, Lynn.
Yeah, when you're in this mode, it has to have pretty robust internet, I would think, to be able to find all those maps that are out there. You can check my place down here and see what you can find for me around Jackson. I live right near Colton.
Yeah, see, even when I zoom out for a larger area, slowly, it will pop up every quadrangle. I don't know why they're not showing up.
Yep. I would have to say that just comes down to the service aspect. And even if you think you have pretty good service, it may not be good enough for Avenza, I'm guessing. Avenza might need a little bit more. If you have a chance to do some Wi-Fi or connect to Wi-Fi, I would try it then.
Stephanie and Eric, I think one thing to note is it might be the type of application you have, like you're running, because I have a Samsung and mine doesn't have the blue markers, but I can zoom in and see maps. So I see a couple of comments about having good or good service and things like that, and I think it might be a little different.
Okay.
It does have iPhone. Something's weird with that one.
Yeah. Yeah, Lynn, you feel free to contact one of us, and we can I'll put my contact email in here, and we'll have Eric and Stephanie do the same.
I think mine's already in there. Let's see. I'm checking to see if it has GPS.
Yeah, that's weird. But I don't see any other questions.
Okay, I think what we'll do at this point is wrap up the recording, and then whoever wants to hang on to get questions answered will do that. So again, I want to thank everybody for participating in our virtual Day in the Woods on mapping. Keep in mind that we're going to do 2 more recordings. One is going to be on my land plan with pretty good detail, and one on Google Earth. And we'll do some live interaction with it in the recording, and we'll have PowerPoints, and those will all be available on the Southeast Ohio Woods webpage, which I'll type in one more time before we close out. And then you can go there and find all the resources from today's program. We'll also put today's recording, and we'll all put it on one post that we'll share with everybody that's registered for the program. So again, thanks for joining us today, and take some time to get out there and enjoy a day in the woods before all the rain hits on the weekend.